10 psychological facts that is gonna blow your mind. Continue watching. Psychology is basically the study of conscious and unconscious phenomes, as well as feelings and thoughts. Let's move towards the facts. When we talk about psychological factors that influence consumer decisions, we are referring to the workings of the mind or psyche, motivation, learning and socialization, attitudes and beliefs. The number one psychological and most interesting fact is that if we have a plan B, our plan A is less likely to work. Researchers found that when volunteers thought about a backup plan before starting a task, they did worse than those who hadn't thought about a plan B. What's more, when they realized they had options, their motivation for succeeding the first time around dropped. The researchers stress that thinking ahead is a good idea, but you might be more successful if you keep those plans vague. Number 2 is catching a yawn could help us bond. There are a few theories about why yawning is contagious, but one of the leading ones is that it shows empathy. People who are less likely to show empathy, such as toddlers who haven't learned it yet or young people with autism, are also less likely to yawn in reaction to someone else's. Number 3 is beginnings and ends are easier to remember than middles. When people are asked to recall items from a list, they're most likely to think of things from the very end, or from the very beginning. The middle gets muddled, which could also play into why you remember your boss wrapping up her presentation, but not so much about the middle. Number 4, it takes 5 positive things to outweigh a single negative thing. Our brains have something called a negativity bias that makes us remember bad news more than good, which is why you quickly forget that your coworker complimented your presentation but keep dwelling on the fact that a kid at the bus stop insulted your shoes. To feel balanced, we need at least a 5-to-1 ration of good to bad in our lives. Number 5 is when one rule seems too strict, we want to break more. Psychologists have studied a phenomenon called reactance. When people perceive certain freedoms being taken away, they not only break the rule, but they break even more than they otherwise would have in an effort to regain their freedom. This could be one of the best psychology facts to explain why a teenager who can't use his phone in class will chew gum while stealthily sending a text. Number 6 is that our brains want us to be lazy. Evolutionarily speaking, conserving energy is a good thing. When food was scarce, our ancestors still had to be ready for anything. Unfortunately for anyone watching their weight, that still holds true today. A small study published in Current Biology found that when walking on a treadmill, volunteers would automatically adjust their gait to burn fewer calories. Number 7 is that being lonely is bad for our health. Psychologists say that the more lonely you've been over your life, the more likely you are to have conditions that affect your heart health like obesity, high blood pressure, and bad cholesterol levels, for example. And women who are lonely may be more likely to get coronary heart disease. It can cause mental health problems, such as anxiety, emotional distress, addictions, or depression. Loneliness can also increase the risk of suicidal death. Decreased sleep quality. Chronic loneliness can result in difficulty falling asleep and/or interrupted sleep. Number 8 is that when you feel like you're low on something, like money, you obsess over it. Psychologists have found that the brain is sensitive to scarcity, the feeling that you're missing something you need. When farmers have a good cash flow, for instance, they tend to be better planners than when they're tight for money, one study found. When you're feeling cash-strapped, you might need more reminders to pay bills or do chores because your mind is too busy to remember. Number 9 is that we will always find a problem. Ever wonder why when one problem resolves, another one takes its place? It's not that the world is against you, but your brain might be, in a sense. Researchers asked volunteers to pick out threatening-looking people from computer-generated faces. As we showed people fewer and fewer threatening faces over time, we found that they expanded their definition of threatening to include a wider range of faces. The last psychological fact is that the power makes people care less about others. You've probably heard about the famous Stanford prison experiment. Refresher: college students were randomly assigned to be either a prisoner or guard in a fake prison, and the guards started harassing the prisoners. It got so bad that the 2-week experiment was cancelled after 6 days. That's pretty extreme, but later studies have found that when people feel like they're in a power position, they become worse at judging a person's feelings based on their facial expressions, indicating a loss of empathy. Thanks for watching. Do subscribe for the updates.